both sides of the equation. I am an employee myself, and, having to be in that situation where I need to constantly communicate with my management on, how productive I am right now, where my time is going, and all that good stuff. And also as an employer and as a business owner, how to navigate this whole COVID crisis. So Mother Honestly is a platform. We're mostly active on Instagram and on LinkedIn. We put together conferences every year. We actually have a summit coming up in about 2 weeks. I can drop the link out there for everyone if you want to join us. It's a parent summit as well. And we're just here. We're just here to support moms. We have a community of about 300,000 moms. We have a podcast. We have a newsletter. There's just so many ways that we continue to support moms through this trying period.
Fantastic, Blessing. Thanks so much. And last but certainly not least, Diana, if you'd like to give a quick introduction to the work that you do and who you are.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Reddy. I'm a labor lawyer and also currently a doctoral student in the Jurisprudence and Social Policy program at UC Berkeley. I'm also a mom of a 4-month-old and a 4-year-old, and I washed my hair for this talk. So I hope everyone's appreciating that. My work really focuses on the laws that we have in place in the United States to regulate employment and the extent to which they're based on a lot of assumptions about the value of certain types of work, which are often linked to who historically has done that work in ways that are both gendered and racialized. So I am currently doing research about how different social movements throughout history have approached the concept of work and whether work is a source of liberation or a source of oppression. And in fact, it is often both. And one of the things that can make it more liberating is to change the kind of social safety net, the regulations that can make work a more empowering place for all of us. So that's kind of the vision that I come to these questions with. So I'm really excited to be here and to talk to all of you about these really important, difficult things right now.
Likewise. So we've had quite a few new people joining us. So I just want to do a quick big hello to everybody who's here. Again, I'm so grateful. I know everybody is time pressed right now. So now more than ever, it's hard to find these sort of chunks of time to learn and sort of come up with these strategies. I think you all can see why I was so excited to have this panel. It's an amazing group of women that we have with us. And so as I stated a little bit earlier, the first part will be questions that are based from questions that you all posed, but that I sort of synthesized and tried to condense a little bit that I'll be asking, with the first half focused on personal care and sort of personal life issues, the second half being work issues. And then after that, we'll try to wrap up at about the halfway point and open it up to questions that you all have. So it's great to see so many people that are involved in this. And certainly I understand the need. And when we had spoken as a panel or as a group a few days ago, everybody here who's talking today certainly understands the need from a personal and professional level as well. So the first question is going to go to you, Beth. One of the things that we've talked about in the past is the way that unconscious scripts play a role in women's lives and how they frame their work and themselves, as mothers. And so a lot of people who have written in talked about how to maintain healthy boundaries around time and sort of their own energies, because clearly there's more work that needs to be done than can be done in a day. So how do you sort of keep a sense of sort of management around that, but also feel good about the work that you're doing, that you're not somehow cutting corners? Because I think that's the other side of it as well. So I was hoping that you'd be able to address that for a couple minutes.
Great, thank you so much. So first of all, the idea of unconscious scripts, unconscious agreements, I think is really important to start there, to realize and just name that we all have these based on our conditioning, based on our life history, based on our parents' history, and in our lineage, that we have agreed to certain ways of being in the world without even realizing it. So to make those things conscious then gives us the power to be able to deconstruct them and decide which of those agreements we've made or scripts that we take on and operate from that we actually feel good about perpetuating. Because when we operate from scripts and unconscious agreements, we're not only affecting the quality of our own lives, but we're then setting up the next generation for the scripts that we're teaching those scripts to the next generation. So making them conscious and even just knowing that that's something we can do to bring that into the light. Then the second part of that, how do we then look at those unconscious scripts and then use those to create different boundaries in our lives, particularly during this stressful time? I think that it's really important to recognize that we are experiencing a lot of the same struggles. There's a lot of differences, but there's so many similar stressors. So that one of the things I think is so important to do is to take this out of the individual. This is, I'm not doing a good job, or I'm personally inadequate because I can't keep up with all the things, and recognize that the structures are not there.
I think you paused out for a minute, Beth. So I'm going to switch over to Darcy, and then hopefully we can have you continue with what you were saying right there. So one moment of technical difficulties. I'm going to turn over to you, Darcy, but it's a similar sort of question, I think, in terms of what we were talking about in terms of the questions that have been coming in. And this is something that, to be full disclosure, I struggle with too, is that, and I did read your book, which was an amazing book, and I took away a lot from that, but that I think sometimes as women, we feel like we're doing the work. We feel like we're approaching our spouses and saying, these are the issues that I have, these are the problems, I need you to step up and do X, Y, Z, and then it doesn't really happen. So how do you take that next step after you feel like you're really even taking on work that shouldn't be in your lap in the first place and turn it into action and equality?
Right. I think it really helps, and this is based on interviews with a lot of women and couples, to establish in your relationship an idea that you come up with together about what's fair. So what does fair mean? You know, you might say to your partner, I'd like us to both be contributing the same amount of time to the labor of the home and the kids, and then ask him, because we're talking about sexism in relationships, right? So we're talking about male-female relationships, I think, mostly here today, and that's what my book focuses on, right? Sexism in heterosexual relationships. So you ask your male partner, you know, what sounds fair to you? Does a 50-50 division of our time, each of us, you know, spending the same general amount of time on domestic labor, does that seem like a reasonable goal to you? And I think it's very hard when you frame it that way if you're in an egalitarian relationship. And I think if you're having this discussion at all, you're probably in an egalitarian relationship. It's hard within that context to say no. The research all shows that our values don't actually predict our behavior. But when you're asking someone this question, you really are asking about values. So once the two of you have come to this mutually agreed upon goal, we're each going to spend the same amount of hours doing this stuff because it's our family and our household together, you can kind of go from there. And there are different ways to do it from there. But I think that once this is established, you're no longer fighting about who's doing more, but you're saying to your spouse, or he to you, I suppose, you know, this mutual goal we haven't reached it. Let's put our heads together once again and think about how we can get closer toward it.
Thank you. So Beth, we're going to try this one more time and pick up where you, hold on a second, where you had left off. We were talking a little bit about unconscious scripts and how we can kind of use that as we're battling those inner demons that tell us that we're not being good enough, we're not doing enough, even though we're working as hard as we can.
Yeah. So that's one of the unconscious scripts we hold as women, that we're supposed to do all the things all the time at some really, at a level that's not actually possible, that the bar has been raised, while, you know, like the parenting expectations of our generation of mothers have moved, while the support structures have fallen off. So there's a setup. The unconscious agreements and scripts we have are not realistic. So we've got to create those for ourselves, decide which of those make sense for our families, which of them are aligned with our value systems, and which ones are just not realistic, specific in particular during this time when everyone's got extra stressors on their plates. And to realize too that when part of the reason we're not expressing our values is because our needs aren't very well met. So that there's that relationship that I think we want to pay attention to, that it's easier to express our values when our needs are better met. So to take that seriously, get the, the rest you need, whatever self-care we can put in place allows us to express our values more fluidly.
It sounds a little bit like the put your oxygen mask on first sort of idea of, and I know I've struggled with this too, of, how that it does pay itself forward when you take care of yourself first and then let the rest sort of fill in beyond that rather than just always having it be one direction. Thank you. Last thing. So we're going to move a little bit to the second part of this with work issues. And one of the questions that came up quite frequently, and it's sort of a two-pronged question here, is that I think more so I'm hearing from women than men, but women workers are saying, I've taken so much more on recently, of course, because my children are home all day and I don't have childcare, and now I'm doing all this extra work, but my boss is not changing expectations at work. And what can I do to make it clear that those expectations are no longer realistic? And what that ties to a little bit, I think, is also this, that the village that we had is not in place. So several people had also mentioned how, and I know Mother Honestly has a fantastic village and you've done so much to build that, but now when we're exclusively in a virtual world and we can't hand our kids over virtually, how do we sort of reinvigorate that village mentality in the place we are now?
Absolutely. First of all, can everybody hear me? Just a thumbs up. Perfect. So, I mean, we are living in unprecedented times. Everybody knows that. The good news is that the line between work and home has been flattened. So there isn't, you don't need to provide some long explanation for why you cannot maybe turn in an assignment as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to give an example because people love examples. I got a call from my boss saying I need something at the top of the hour. So we were putting together a presentation and, I had submitted a presentation. He wanted me to make changes and they were not simple changes, and he said, I need it at the top of the hour. And, I immediately just responded very respectfully and said, I would be able to do this, if I was in the office. An hour is plenty. I said, but I am home and I have 3 kids, ages 11 and 2 and 8 months. I currently have the baby breastfeeding right now and I'm trying to get the baby to sleep. And so I cannot have it done at the top of the hour. Can you give me another hour? And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know, and I think that is the level of transparency that we need to start having. Somebody mentioned in one of the panel that I was on about 3 days ago, parent out loud. Parent out loud is literally the hashtag of this, for 2020. As far as we're concerned, because it's no longer enough for you to hide the fact that you have kids and hoping that will get you some kind of promotion. Everybody now knows, that we're all working from home, we all have kids, and somehow we're gonna have to make this work. So that is the first thing, parent out loud. I think the second thing is, of course we want to keep our jobs, right? I mean, this is we already, everybody knows the numbers. 33 million people are unemployed right now. Getting unemployment checks. Most of us don't want to be in that boat, so we sort of need to keep our job. But I think that there are very strategic ways to do that. First of all is over communicate. I mean, it's no longer enough to just communicate something and expect that somebody understands you or your management or your team understands you. You need to speak up and over communicate your expectations. So I always take the approach of repeating everything that is being said to me. So if your manager says, I need something in an hour. Oh, you need it in an hour? Like, wow, okay, we cannot do that, right? Here is why. So over communicate and make sure that the other party understands your needs and where you are. Because if they don't understand and you just kind of like, oh, you know what, I can't have it done in an hour, like you need to have some explanation. You need to give some, some support, to your arguments. So those are the two biggest things for me, honestly. Katie, is over communicate and parent out loud. And don't be scared. I think that a lot of people are scared to speak up. But you'll be surprised that when you are the advocate in your team, other people are going to speak up. When I spoke up and said, you know what, I cannot have it in an hour, another guy chimed in. He was like, you know what, I have 3 kids in the background and our tents just flew away. I got to go pick up the tent and put the tent back together because that's the only way they're going to shut up for another 30 minutes so I can get my work done. So you'll be so surprised that even the men on your team, you can sort of try to bring them on as allies and they can support you through this journey.
You think in that way that women are sort of spearheading that parent out loud then?
Absolutely. I think that women are doing the most of it, but I think there's also genuine ways to nudge the men, right? A lot of men are also doing, we're all in the same boat. Even if some of them are hiding, like we know, I have one right now, he's hiding in the media room, I mean, some of them are hiding. They don't want to deal with the kids. But at the end of the day, they are also feeling the pressure. And, they come out of the hiding to eat lunch and, the kids, attack them and they're there for another hour or two. So I think that, we need to give men credit here as well. Some of them, a lot of them are stepping up to the plate. So I think we need a little bit of nudging for them to, acknowledge the fact that this is hard. I think men don't like to acknowledge that something is hard, right? We just need to push them to do that.
Thank you. So Diana, you come from a slightly different background in terms of how you approach labor issues and all of that. And so the question that I have for you, that's again based so much on what people have been writing in and asking about, is what do we do then with women who are essential workers, primarily mothers who are essential workers, and how they can get the support that they need, particularly when and I think that they've been at the forefront of this, but then as the, open the economy talk has been going on, more parents and mothers in particular are saying, we can't do this without childcare. So as we sort of try to navigate this middle ground here without those supports, what do you think people can do that, would get those supports in place quickly?
Absolutely. It's such an important question. And I mean, so I look at the way that people acting collectively, what we might call social movements, but I mean, every time people get together, even just in a forum like this, that's an incipient movement, right? We're all coming together to share what is hard for us and what we might need to make things better. And so in kind of in the scholarship that I'm really immersed in, there's this question of why hasn't there been more of a social movement for things like care work? Why hasn't there, in particular, there's a really famous study, why isn't there a social movement for long-term care? Which isn't exactly what we're talking about here, but it's very related. And it's often because, and this speaks to what some of the other panelists have said, that when it comes to care work, there's this sense that particularly for women, particularly for mothers, that it's our individual responsibility. And that to ask for support for that is in some way admitting that we're not doing what we should. And I think what the opportunity of this crisis is to really emphasize that was never possible. It has never been possible for individual people to take on all the care work that is necessary for society to function. And so I think part of what's important for creating societal change is exactly what folks are doing now, right? I love the idea of parenting out loud, right? Naming what our responsibilities are and being very open about it, and also kind of shaking off, as Beth said, the unconscious scripts that this is something we should be doing as individuals. About essential workers, we know that the breaking things down into demographic categories, women of color are more likely to be essential workers than any other group. And there's a host of reasons for that, but in part it's because these are because of racism, because of sexism, and because of the inaccessibility of other jobs, particularly because they have been too demanding for people who are taking on familial responsibilities. So that's partly like the movement aspect of it. In terms of you know, what can the law do? What can we ask of the law? First of all, there are the Federal CARES Act did create some important benefits for working parents, including the ability to take leave if your child's school, if childcare is unavailable. And so just to be aware of those and to not be scared to use those tools if it's available to you, if it makes sense for your family. There's a lot of research about how even when there are legal supports available, particularly for women, but also for men, that there's a reluctance to use them because, again, it suggests that we're not doing everything that we can as individuals. So I think knowing what's available, using it, and in particular, if you are dealing with a really bad actor employer, knowing that you do have some legal rights and remedies, even within the kind of limited support for workers in the United States. There's a hotline that particularly focuses on the issues of women workers that's run by equal rights advocates. So if any of you or any of your friends, you know, are dealing with particular issues in your workplaces, you can find out about, do I actually have a legal remedy? And then beyond that, I think we need to be thinking about, you know, what do we do to create the world that we want? And I think centering childcare absolutely is essential in that. And one of the research projects I'm working on is looking at how all the different states, when they rolled out their shelter-in-place orders, how clear were they about whether childcare was an essential function? And if it is an essential function, how do you get it? And I know here in California, where, you know, we tend to think of ourselves as very progressive on these issues, there was a lot of uncertainty about can daycare still operate for essential workers? And then a lot of miscommunication. Even though daycares were still allowed to operate for essential workers, there was false information being kind of communicated on Nextdoor that you only if in a two-parent home, only if both parents were essential workers, and only if they were required to work outside the house, were you allowed to have daycares. A lot of, and partly this is because of a governmental failure to be really explicit, childcare is essential work for anyone it is impossible to both provide childcare full-time and do any other work full-time. It's not impossible. I mean, people are doing it, but it is exhausting and is beyond what we really should be asking of people. And if it were, you know, to be like, speak quite honestly, if it were men doing this, trying to take on this double shift, I think there would have been a lot more attention to how do we make this possible. So I want to say that the reason I am able to be on this call is because we have a nanny who is here. And so I just want to, I think when we first realized that we were going to have a nanny come to our home during this time, and after confirming that it was consistent with the shelter-in-place order and consistent with law, there was a lot of shame of, should I be able to do this all myself? And then, you know, my husband and I had a conversation and said, no, we cannot do this all ourselves. And so, you know, one thing I'd love to talk about later is how working parents and domestic workers can be in greater partnership to lift everyone up and to make sure that both working parents and the domestic workers who make their work possible both have the kind of protection and support that they need.
So I wanted to return to one point because it's certainly new to me that you mentioned the CARES Act. I think that's what it was called. Is that similar then in model to like the FMLA in terms of being able to have protected leave from your job that you could return to the same position and that sort of thing? And I presume it's not paid leave since we don't have that in the United States, but are those similar sort of models that can be used?
So this is pandemic specific
Okay.
regulation from the federal government that does provide leave from your job, and I believe with some amount of income protection for if you have to provide childcare. I don't have the specifics right in front of me. I can pull them up or I can circulate them, because I think it is important that everyone knows that I would say that the federal government response has been inadequate, but nevertheless, in the CARES Act, there are some pockets of protection that folks should be aware of.
And then I think you also mentioned a hotline, and if you wanted, when you have a moment, if you wanted to put that in the chat box, that might also be a great addition for people that are looking for the information that they need to have on hand.
Absolutely.
So we are just at the halfway point here, so I did want to hand things over to all the amazing people that we have in our quote-unquote audience. We have many of you that have joined, and I'm so excited to have you here. And so I know for some of us, Zoom is a little bit trickier than it is for others, myself included. But if you use at least if you're on a computer, but I don't know exactly if you're on an iPhone or other sort of smartphone, that there's a chat feature, and you can use that, and you can type a message. Does anybody know actually, if you're on a cell phone, how that works? Could just show your raise of hand. Well, for those of you that can figure that out, please chime in with, and again, so what we're talking about here is, whether you want to share experiences, whether you have questions for a specific person on the panel. If it is, then if you could please use their name, that would be great. And if it's for everybody, then we'll sort of work it out on our side in terms of who might be the best person to address your question. What is the hashtag? Parents do it all. Did somebody mention a hashtag? I wasn't sure if, not quite sure about that.
Parent Out Loud, right?
Parent Out Loud, I love.
Yeah, blessing.
Is Parents Out Loud? Okay, thank you.
Yes, that is something that I think a lot of us in the maternal advocacy sort of ring of things definitely have been speaking out about, no pun intended, but that, and it is something that I've seen even at women-centered conferences, this sort of, oh, I'm so sorry that my child interrupted, or I'm so sorry that, but I think there is that, that's one of the things that I see as a real place of potential here, is that we're not able to keep our children sort of locked away, that you do see all these various conference calls with, rather than the one, I think the BBC guy that went viral because his kid sort of stormed into his office and it was just this big, oh my goodness, but we do all have personal lives, not that we don't all have children, but that we all have factors outside of work that need to be part and parcel of who we are and addressed at a level of importance that should be recognized by workplaces. So I think that there's an opportunity here to have a much more robust conversation about that. And to be honest, I think it's in part because men are seeing more of it in their own lives. So we have a question from Lisa. What are some successful, I might have to scroll up here again, what are some successful techniques for focusing on work? Usually this is not a problem, but the pandemic has me feeling perpetually distracted. So for the speakers, if you want to raise your hand, if you want to take that, then I will put you on the big screen. Is there any takers for that? Darcy, one moment here, I'll switch you over.
Okay. I mean, I think it depends on the source of your distraction. If it's like internal anxiety because of the pandemic, which I've certainly found myself in that spot, I think you kind of need some space to sit with your feelings. If the distraction is your kids, I think you need to work out some time to yourself. So if you have a partner, you have to have a room of one's own, right? As Virginia Woolf said, you have to have some hours. So if it's an issue of external distractions, you gotta carve those hours out and agree with your partner that you're off from 12 to 4 or whatever. Time seems pretty key to that, to the external distractions.
And I think to echo a little bit of that, having that conversation, together of saying, this is what I need, this is what you need. Let's try to find a place where both fit into the schedule. And granted, there's going to have to be some compromise there, but that ideally we can at least hit our top 1 or 2 needs, even though it may not be enough. It's, one step in a positive direction. So somebody did, thank you, chime in regarding if you have a cell phone, how to handle that. It says click the more button and then you can raise your hand while using a mobile. So that was the answer on that one. Yay. So Tammy, I'd love to hear the panelists' take on shaming going on regarding people's varying levels of how we manage safety in this. Is there somebody who wants to take on shame? Blessing, one moment here. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So obviously I have a platform, and I had shared, behind the scenes of my husband and I going to groceries. And I think Katie was the day we had a call. Remember, I said I was doing grocery shopping. So as soon as I got back home, I mean, I got tons of things, right? From Costco, from HEB, from, an ethnic food store. And so we had about, the entire trunk was full. So my husband and I, we set up an assembly line and we started cleaning and doing all the things. And I shared that behind the scene with our community. And usually, we have a wonderful community and people are always supportive. But this one woman responded, and literally was like, I don't understand, what you guys are so terrified about, that you have to keep sharing this fear mongering activities and all those different things. And that it really, usually things don't bother me, but it really bothered me because I responded very gracefully, as I should, that we are living in an unprecedented time.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what we don't know. But at the end of the day, my timeline for returning to work or returning my kids to daycare or going out with or without a mask, I truly believe, should come from me. It doesn't have to be from the federal government. It doesn't have to be from the states. It really needs to come down to my own personal comfort level. Obviously, if the states have said, go ahead and use masks, go ahead and use gloves, whatever it is that they've suggested as, a protective layer, right? We should all try to adhere to that. But things like, going out to shop or washing your groceries or, not getting your kids out of the house as often as everybody else, or not ordering food or ordering food, I think that we all need to give ourselves grace. My comfort level is different from yours. It could also be that my family has, a family member with comorbidities is what they're calling it. And, that person could potentially be harmed by, a slight exposure to this virus. And so I think that it's very important for all of us to literally stop the shaming.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the time. So that's what I'm telling our community. This is not a time for your drama. This is not a time for you to, nag another mom for, having the kids, watch TV or eat pizza every night. This is not the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're all doing the best that we can. And I think that, just don't take it personal. If somebody approaches you and say, hey, why are you doing X, Y, and Z? Don't take it personal. They are just trying to project their own fear on you. So that was what I did. I just decided that I wasn't going to listen to that nonsense and really just focus on my own personal, activities. We all have our hands full. This is not the time to start, bothering myself with somebody else's opinion of me. So I would totally take it from that perspective and move on, frankly.
Thank you. Nice answer. So we have a question from Ariel. It's a question for all the panelists. My husband is not a sexist at all and very understanding, but he is the major source of income in our house. It's important that he get his work done during work hours, while much of my work can get done after bedtime. This can leave me feeling exhausted the next day. We split most things 50-50 in the house, and then I think it unfortunately got cut off, but I believe that we have the gist of it there. I have a feeling I know who might take this, but I will hand it over to the panelists.
I interviewed mothers who were frustrated with this dynamic in their relationship for the book. And women do, characteristically, because we're raised to be communal, seem to suffer from a lack of entitlement. So women will always kind of say, well, my job's more flexible, and their husbands will agree with them. There was one researcher who interviewed couples. There was a physician and a professor, two different couples. The genders were flipped. And in the couple where the wife was the physician, they both said her job was more flexible. And in the couple where the wife was the professor, they both said her job was more flexible. And the writer of the study concluded flexibility is in the eye of the beholder. So it's really easy to not take enough for ourselves. And, you know, again, even when women earn more money, they still come back to the idea that their work and time is less important. So I would encourage the author of this question to really interrogate her own beliefs about whose needs come first, and be honest with herself. Because sexism is in the water, right? We're raised in a patriarchal society. It's hard to let go of the ideas that men's priorities matter more. And it comes up so much in child rearing.
And Lisa asks, how do you broach the topic with your boss about your level of work not being the same with everything? She expects the same level during this time, despite having a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So, and I think that, again, those expectations not changing, despite the fact that we're very aware of the fact that everything else has changed. Is there somebody who wants to take that one? One moment, Beth, I'll switch you over.
To me, that sounds like an opportunity for this parenting out loud concept, you know, to be able to speak up and say, and we have to really find the courage within ourselves to speak up in these moments. We have a lot of conditioning to keep quiet as women. We've been rewarded for it. In part, if you start scrolling back through history, women are killed for speaking up. You know, we've kept quiet to keep our families alive. So this is in our DNA, to keep quiet. So we have to actually start looking at what's going on in our nervous systems that keeps us from speaking up and advocating for ourselves and our needs. I think we also tend to overgive because that's what's been modeled for us. And so across the board, I see that women have to actually learn to not only learn to receive, but to learn how to take what we need. That actually feels selfish. We've got all this narrative around saying, no, this is what I'm going to do. That's not the same in both genders, you know? So being able to look at some of that, it gets back into the unconscious scripts.
Thank you. So we have Melanie who's asking now, what are you hearing about moms and families building micro villages or groups of families to share childcare responsibilities during COVID-19, including setting shared expectations around safety? Are there any best practices that you can recommend? Okay, Blessing, handing it over here.
Yeah, I mean, so that is, we have a Slack community where as soon as COVID started, we kind of rallied all of our moms and we said, come to Slack. And this is a topic that we've been discussing back and forth. And we also discuss it on our Instagram page occasionally throughout this COVID situation. I think the biggest thing we're seeing, and I'm gonna be honest, kind of like Diana. So we have a living nanny here with us. I mean, that is the only way I can have a full-time job and have a company. I'm also building a startup and I have 3 kids and my husband also works full-time. I mean, there's just no other way. So I think a lot of people are, you know, they have help and they're not speaking up. And then so many people don't have help and they're all, you know, again, we're all frazzled and exhausted and stressed out. So I think, you know, that as we continue to understand more about COVID, the more we know about it, then the more you should be preparing yourself to start bringing back help, right? So I would start looking at, and I think it's the right thing to do, is to look for a micro community and say, hey, you and I would tag team on, you know, who is going to watch the kids. So you can start from that kind of, you know, one-on-one with another neighbor or somebody else, you know, not too far from your house, where you can grab the kids one day, that person watches the kids the second day, and that way both families can get work done, right? So I would start with that. And in order to ensure safety, it's the same thing that you're doing. Make sure that the other family is also doing the same thing. They are social distancing as much as they can. They are using, you know, masks when they go out. So have some kind of contractual agreement, right? where both of you are committing to this level of safety. It could also mean that, every morning when the kids switch back and forth, guys do temperature checks. The parents are not allowed to go in. Look at what the daycares are doing. They're all coming up with, 1 day on, 1 day off for cleaning. They are doing all this temperature checks. Why not do the same thing within your own community in order to ensure safety? So I would start with something like that. Nanny sharing is also something you can do. Hire someone, right? And everybody, maybe it's 3 families, rotate where the nanny goes between those days, and try to make it work that way. Because again, these services are expensive. I mean, we've had to literally, move our budget around in order to afford to have somebody, live in our house and pay them enough for them to say, hey, we're not going to go out and be, social distancing. Go out and try to get ourselves, sick or infected. So I think, definitely try as much as possible to have candid conversations, because I think what's happening, we're seeing, is that people are not having candid conversations. They're basically like, it's a handshake. Like, you know what, we understand, we're going to social distance and keep the kids. And then the kids fall sick and we start blaming each other. This is happening among our friends in Michigan, where in Detroit, a lot of the kids are falling sick. And we've seen kids falling sick because both families are not social distancing enough. So I would even, take it next level and say, let's sign a contract that we're all going to be, we're not going to interact, outside of our work and our home, and that's it. I've seen families doing groceries for each other or going grocery shopping together just to make sure that they're all keeping this social distance. And I'm not trying to, spread any fear or anxiety, but I think that depending on where you are in the fear spectrum, right, how terrified you of this virus, then your response should mirror that, right? So that you can have that comfort to continue your work and living your life as best as you can.
And perhaps have that candid conversation beforehand to see if you're at the same level, right? And so that that there's at least a baseline that we're on the same page with this and this. And that's still something that I'm trying to work in as well, because.
And some daycares are still open, right? So understanding, what their safety protocol is. I know our daycare is saying, we have all this temperature checks, parents cannot come in. Some daycares are saying 1 day on and 1 day off, and maybe even look at the daycare workers that have been laid off, right? That was what we did to have the current, help that we have is, she was laid off. She doesn't have a family. So she's like, you know what, why not moving into a nice 1-bedroom in your house and, take care of the kids and still get paid and, keep all that money, because essentially she's not paying, extra bills. So, find situations. And I think it was Diana that said there needs to be a partnership between the caregiving community and the parents that need it. And I think that if we can, unfortunately, women are the one, right, that are affected by this, the caregivers, but this is also an opportunity for them to keep getting paid while we find a solution.
Right. And which is so important for so many people, but particularly those that were financially vulnerable in the first place, which oftentimes, unfortunately, is caregivers due to being under-remunerated and many of the factors, of course, systemic sexism and racism that ties into it that keeps care work underpaid. But we've certainly seen the fallout in terms of that across the board. And so we have, I want to see if there, not all employers. So there was a comment in there on the side. I do encourage anybody who has the opportunity to go through the group chat. There's some great resources there in terms of some links, phone numbers that you can use. But for our final minutes here, I'm going to hopefully go in reverse order that we started with and revisit the guests that we have with us today: Darcy Lockman, Beth Berry, Diana Reddy, and Blessing. I'm sorry, I don't want to mangle your last name, but we'll return to the 4 of you. And the question that we're going to close with is, you can pick one. It's a choose your own adventure. So what is your best piece of advice during this COVID crisis, particularly aimed, of course, at mothers? Or what is one action step that more mothers could take to make motherhood more sustainable for themselves and for other women? So basically, either direction you want to take it, I am sure that you have great advice. And I'm going to start with Diana because I believe she was the last one to speak for the introduction.
These are great questions. You're really a great question asker. But I mean, I think I want to go back to the idea of really challenging your assumptions and kind of the internalized beliefs that you have about what it is that you're supposed to be able to do. And I was just thinking about this. I mean, I think this definition, this legal term of what is an essential worker is so important because it really encapsulates what are our societal beliefs about what we can't do without. And I think the fact that restaurants, it was always, that restaurants were always considered essential work, and the folks who worked in them were essential workers because of this recognition that a lot of people are not able to cook for themselves. But there wasn't such clear messaging around childcare because there still is this assumption that as long as there is a woman in a home, there is someone who can provide all the childcare that is needed. Mm-hmm. And I think that's only, that kind of societal belief is only possible because women have taken on so much for so long and not voiced how incredibly difficult, taxing, exhausting, demoralizing that is. And so just to really feel, to recognize that these kind of categories that shape our lives are affected by or that our silence contributes to the perpetuation of them, and to recognize that anyone who is trying to take care of children while doing anything else needs help. And of course, many of the sources of help that we have long relied on are not available, but to try to find out what sources are and to feel absolutely righteous in securing and asking for that help.
Thank you. Blessing, closing. Actually, I wanted to, sorry, one moment. I know that we didn't quite get to talk about hand in hand, so I wanted to know if you wanted to do a quick kind of
yes, briefly. Thank you so much, Katie, for reminding me about that. So I'm a member of a group called Hand in Hand, the Domestic Employers Network. There's another Hand in Hand that does parenting work, which is also fantastic, but it's a different group. And so what this group does is it does social movement coalition building among the folks who need domestic workers in order to live their lives and do their work, and domestic workers who need to have safe, fair, equitable jobs. As I've mentioned, domestic workers have been excluded from a ton of the legal protections that the rest of us take for granted. This includes basic things like overtime, anti-discrimination protections, and importantly, occupational safety and health protections. And this is, if you look at the record of this, it was explicitly because women and people of color tended to do this kind of work. And so there was a compromise reached where they said, okay, domestic workers don't get these protections. And so I think more than ever today, it is clear that, the domestic work is the work that makes all other work possible. And that if those of us who need support in our caregiving responsibilities want to have that support, we need to make sure that these jobs are well paid, are protected. So please take a look at the Hand in Hand website. I think it's domesticemployers.org. And currently, and actually right now, for those of you who are interested in California politics, on the California Domestic Worker Coalition Facebook page, there is a virtual rally for SB 1257, which would eliminate the domestic worker exclusion from occupational safety and health protections in California. So for those of you Californians, you can get onto that right after this if that's something that you're interested in.
And Diana had also listed those other references that she mentioned at the start of the program today, in terms of if you have an employer who is not following proper protocols, how to reach out and hopefully get the support that you need. And that's in the chat box as well now. So Blessing, just as a recap, do you have a great piece of advice for moms right now, or is there an action step that you think moms can do on behalf of other moms in order to make motherhood more sustainable?
I think definitely let's continue to support each other. The only way we're going to get through this is together. And that's one of the reason, we have a summit coming up where we're bringing the parents, the employers, we're bringing everybody together, because I think what we're going to see is that employers are going to need to get personal. They're going to need to help us figure out the whole childcare situation. They're going to need to help figure out, if we're all going to be working from home, and they are going to be saving on that real estate, how are they going to support the working parents, right, that are now home with their kids? And how are they going to support that working parent in getting affordable childcare that he or she needs in order to keep working for them, right? Doing the work that needs to be done. So I think that's one. I think the second piece really is take care of yourself, because, I'm hearing all these things about, oh, the economy is going south, and the economy is not going south. The fundamentals of the economy are still there. People are still eating, people are still ordering food, people are still cooking and cleaning. The reason why nobody's talking about this is because women are the one doing these things. So everybody is saying the economy is, going south because there's no, manufacturers, the main, the trading and all these different things that are supposed to be happening are not happening. But the activities that needs to happen are still happening, except it's now on the women, right? We're the one home cooking, cleaning, and doing all these different things. So let's try to block out those noise and really, draw inwards and focus on ourselves, focus on our family, take care of ourselves first, because that's the only way you're going to be able to thrive through all of this. This is where I tell people, brace for impact. We're in this for the long haul. COVID-19 is not going anywhere anytime soon. So you're going to need to fundamentally develop yourself and your family to withstand what's coming. And you're not going to do that by listening to all this, negative news cycle. You're going to do that by really developing yourself emotionally and physically to get through this. So take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your kids. Use this time as an opportunity to bond with them. Maybe that guy is hiding up there, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Have a conversation, have wine, have dinner, and talk through it. This is a time to get personal with your spouse and your kids. We're never going to have something like this happen to us again. And so let's make the most of it instead of trying to tear each other down.
Thank you once again, Blessing. And Beth, you are next up here. Same question. I'm going to try to switch over to you. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
My suggestion would be in line with what Blessing, what you're saying, and that is to take your own needs seriously. Realize that they're different than your partner's needs, they're different than your children's needs, than your best friend's needs, that we have unique needs that need to get met in order for us to thrive, or even to get by in a way that allows us to parent and to live from our value systems. So if you're an introverted person and are resourced in alone time, take that seriously. It matters a lot, especially if you're home with kids all the time and you have constant nervous system stimulation without a lot of support. Realize that the better met your needs are, the better you're going to be able to show up for your family. The other part that I would say is, like, take this opportunity to break the rules. Like, the rules weren't working anyway. And remember that, like, the systems and structures weren't working before this. Now it's just really, really amplified and illuminated. So to take this opportunity to decide, that doesn't work for me and my family, that doesn't either, and I'm not participating in X, Y, and Z, so that we can start to lay the foundation for creating new systems going forward.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you pointing out the potential, which is sometimes hard to find right now, but I also think is really a place of possibility as we go forward. Darcy, we are going to have you finish us out here. If I can switch over, it's going a little bit slow right now. There we go.
Okay. Well, I would say if the gender division of labor is a problem for you in your home, you really want to wrap your head around it. And I would suggest reading my book, All the Rage, which is actually out in paperback this week. There's also an Audible version of it if you don't have time to read. But it really breaks the problem down. And understanding can't always prevent problems, but it can at very least teach us a lot of useful things about the best way to approach them, which diminishes the sense of persecution and passivity and confusion that we feel if we don't really have a grip on why things are going the way they are. And also, more ambitiously, the understanding is hopefully a first step towards attempting to shift or tug at society's ideals, and bring about the world in which we want, in which mothers are not the default parent and parents are equally participatory in all the labor that running a household with kids requires.
Thank you so much. So I hope that you all agree with me that these women are absolutely amazing in their advice and in their intellect and in their experience. I know that I'm going to be taking away a lot from this. While the recording started a bit late, I do plan on rewatching some of this because there were so many wise words to try to pull in and think about and use going forward. And so for the closing bit here, thank you for joining us. We had a great turnout, and I'm so glad that so many of you were able to voice questions, and they were great questions because I think, again, I think for the most part, we all are feeling those questions and how they're relevant in our lives right now. Somebody had posted in the chat box that while we're very much in the same storm, we're all in different boats, or we're not in the same boat. And I think that that's also very wise, but there's certainly challenges that are based specifically on race and class and all the things, gender, that we've been talking about over the past hour. And yet there are some shared commonalities, I think, that go across all of motherhood that we can use, as Diana was saying, to really be the force behind movement building that will get childcare, that will get Parent Out Loud being part of our daily lives. And I hope that that's the case. So for Darcy, Beth, Diana, and Blessing, thank you for sharing your time and your wise words. For those of you that are not familiar with IAMAS, please check us out at iamas.com, which is IAMAS. And you can also follow us on Facebook, where we're pretty active at I Am a Feminist Mom. Twitter has the same handle, I Am a Feminist Mom. And I look forward to having a robust conversation on both of those platforms as this talk continues after we all leave today. So good luck moving forward into these uncharted waters. And thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Bye.
Bye.